Okay, we can't wait. We are going to move this video ahead of the other two planned in this series, partly because it will set up the next one, but mostly because I'm simply too excited and want to get this out there right away. This video will be very revealing. As promised, it's time to review the Dead Sea Scrolls to test these so-called Proto-Esther Fragments. Are they Esther? Well, they call them proto because they are not direct quotes, so they are not really saying that they are directly, no. However, we'll test whether they can even be deemed as truly related, and just how much so. However, the question remains, and we'll answer it now. Are these even representing the story of Esther? Or are they taking the credit from another book, which is actually found at least as proto, as they label it, in the Dead Sea Scrolls? This has huge ramifications. If these do prove to be even Proto-Esther, then they would legitimize that book at least somewhat. However, if this proves to be a lie, well, we will respond accordingly. Let's see what we find. Even in the introduction, Geza Vermes mentions these Proto-Esther fragments, in the fine print, of course. He just told us the book of Esther is not found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which we read last video, and then there's this footnote. Is this appropriate, though? We'll see. We have the fragments right there, published in his book, and we will review them together in plain English. They say what they say. This will not be over your head. All of you will get this. We will begin with the shorter of the two fragments, though the other comes first. There are others, but illegible at least as of these publishings, with updates from recent years even. Proto-Esther D, they call it. The Most High, whom you Jews, Yahudim, really, fear and worship, rules over the whole earth. Wow. Everyone whom he wishes comes near. Wow. That's quite an endorsement. And who is this from? We'll see. Bhagasra. Whoever speaks an evil word against Bhagasra will be put to death, for there is no one to destroy his good forever. Now, who has the power to decree something like this? This is specifically, and we will find this, is the king of Persia. We'll deal with which one, don't worry, and we're going to go into a lot of detail here in this video, which will be long, and it needs to be. We're going to cover everything. But is that Esther? If you only glance, perhaps it sort of looks like it, but is it really? Are there other stories that are a better match? That's the question here. There are three main elements to this fragment, and we can test them. But what do they test as? Esther? We'll see. This is a decree from a king, undoubtedly, especially the second fragment ties this to Persia indeed. Wait, could that be Esther then? Well, maybe, based on just that, but we're going to vet that fully. 1. The Most High. Now, that is a title we can definitely test. Notice it is not a Persian god. This is the one the Yahudim of Israel fear. And it's no surprise, actually, to see that this king respects his Yahuwah's position and power, because we certainly see that demonstrated in Cyrus and Darius I and Artaxerxes in Persia. So this is not a rarity at all, at least even in their own writings. The language is there. The second factor is this name, Bhagasra. Does that sound like Mordecai, Esther's uncle? Well, no, it doesn't. Is it Esther? No. Her Hebrew name is Hadassah. Well, supposedly. And, well, that also fails. That doesn't fit. None of those are Bhagasra. They don't lead there. Anyone in Esther's story, even? No. No one. But is there another text that more closely fits this name? We'll see. The protection, number 3, of the king under threat of death for those violating his order. Now that happens in Esther, admittedly, with Mordecai, Esther's uncle, in the end. But does this really fit Esther? Or is there another story which better matches, which also has that element, as well as the others? Let's see. Starting out, this first one is a major problem for Esther, not even just with this fragment, but in general. Not only does her book never use the title Most High for Yahuwah, it never uses his name, period. Not even once. No one. She does not pray to him, nor does Mordecai. No one acknowledges him. She fasts, but that is also a pagan ritual, in Persia especially, and specifies nothing. You would think when it said she fasts, she's also praying, but there's nothing at all. It's very secular. However, there is another text from the time of Esther written by the prophet Ezra. Oh wait, let's see. Writing of a prophet, or unidentified writing of a concubine story, a political intrigue, and a secular one even. Nothing in the story about Yahuwah. But woman power, yeah, that's there. Overcoming, in a sense, yourself. It sounds like a Hollywood story, which is why they love it. And even demanding death at the end. Well, that's scripture? Yeah, we'll see. Which sounds like scripture to you? Well, let's check the writings of Ezra during the same exact time, even identifying the same exact years, during the same reign of the same king, who is the one from Esther, Artaxerxes. One would think scholars would immediately have done this, but see, that does not serve their purpose in most cases, and you're going to see exactly their agenda. Well, looky here. Not only does this part match 1st Esdras, which uses the title specifically Most High, about 29 times between 1st and 2nd Esdras, but who is using it here? On the fragment, it is the decree. Oh, it needs to be a decree to match this fragment, doesn't it? From the king. And he's saying Most High, the one from Israel. That's the one, yeah. By the way, don't be confused. Esdras is merely the Latin and Greek form of the name Ezra. This is Ezra. That's Ezra. Here we see an exact match, and this is a monumental portion of this fragment, claiming a book that never even represents Yahuwah as its God, as using the title Most High, which it doesn't ever, and even in a decree from a king, which doesn't at all appear in that book of Esther. It's simply absent. That's forcing this. It doesn't work. And look how simple this was. King Darius of Persia calls Yahuwah Most High. Wow. In his decree supporting and protecting Zerubbabel, who will return to Jerusalem and continue the Second Temple construction. By the way, with a mass migration of Hebrews with him that are returning as well. Wow. But you won't find that in Esther anywhere. No mention, yet that happened during Esther's time. Yeah, during her time. She didn't even know about it, evidently. Wonder why. It is in 1st Esdras, which better fits this criteria, and you will see for all of them. Oh wait, is Darius the only king of Persia to use Most High to refer to Yahuwah, the God of Israel? Well, from Esther you wouldn't know. But from 1st Esdras, there's even another in Persia. Wow. Wow, here we have it again from 1st Esdras, but not from Esther. It's not there. This time, even the king from the time of the story of Esther, as well as Ezra's period, Artaxerxes, uses Most High. Gee, I thought he hated Jews. Really? Because he had an affinity for their God. He had an affinity for their temple, for their people, and even for their law, which Esther says he wasn't even aware of. But was that true? Well, we will find out. So he refers to the Elohim of Israel as Most High as well in his decree. This is also a decree, this time for Ezra's return with another mass migration to Israel right at the time, just before Esther is taken into the palace. The question, what is she doing in Persia? She should have returned to Jerusalem. Good question. Now, this double fits 1st Esdras. Second fragment, first criteria goes to 1st Esdras overwhelmingly. Done. Esther, the survey says, fails. Then the text identifies this name Bhagasra, who is protected by the king, which we'll cover next, because that's the third criteria. Where did this name come from? It's not in the entire Bible. It's not in Esther, definitely, and anything close to it for that matter. Mordecai, Esther's uncle, who would be this person that would kind of fit, if it could fit, never leads to Bhagasra in etymology, nor is he known as anything but Mordecai. And remember, Esther already failed the first test, so not a good sign. Esther has two names, but he doesn't. He only has one that he's known, and in fact, everybody knows he's a Jew. He's not concealing that. So it's just not there. However, in 1st Esdras, in the contest of wisdom among the three bodyguards, in the palace of Darius, that's his time, it's right there. The winner, who is honored by the king and even offered protection, is Zerubbabel. Could this be a better match than Mordecai? Viewing this as ancient Hebrew, which only has consonants, essentially, this was found in Qumran. This name, Bhagasra, is BGSR. Now, it's in Greek, not Hebrew, but it's likely a Hebrew name. It's a Bible name. This is Bible fragment, basically, or at least commentary of some sort. Now, in 1st Esdras especially, we have completed a reconciliation of the 1611 King James Bible now. And we find oftentimes that names are scrambled. Most of the same letters are there, but they are in a different order even. Now this may have something to do with the Latin from which it derives in translation. Basically, did Ezra write in Hebrew originally, that was then translated into Greek, which was then translated into Latin, which now we're looking at the English. Certainly things can get lost in translation. And that's why it's good to have the original as best we can. Now, this is normal for Esdras, though. Esdras and Ezra, both. His writings confuse the Persian kings even, and we'll see that. We'll actually address that in this video a little. And you see the reversing of names in order. And they may even be the same letters sometimes, or pretty close, but it's just they're jumbled up, and one just wonders how that happens, but it did. However, look at the letters ZRB and BSR, or what could be BZR, as they are interchangeable letters. So we have a 75% match in name with Bhagasra. However, from Esther, Mordecai, who is forced in attempt to claim this is Esther, which cannot be, can't actually fit, is MRDKY. It matches one letter. Epic fail. First Esdras passes again as this fragment appears to originate in First Esdras. Esther fails. 0 for 2. Let's look at the third and final criteria for the king's decree in this particular fragment. Now, anyone who speaks an evil word against Bhagasra, now that's not Mordecai, will be put to death. Now, this would match Esther in a sense. That's if Bhagasra could even possibly be Mordecai, which he cannot. However, First Esdras regarding Zerubbabel, King Darius, same context, same story. For every criteria here in this fragment, it fits. King Darius decrees protection by penalty of death for Zerubbabel and those that are returning to Jerusalem. Your stuff taken and you will be hanged is the warning. The decree is long, but go ahead and read it all. It fits. Esther does not. The three criteria in this fragment of a king's decree found in Qumran, meaning it is a Bible story, or at least somehow connected to it, they kept scripture, is the story of Zerubbabel and King Darius from First Esdras. It is not Esther who fails all three tests, yet they pass. The Most High is even decreed by Darius himself in writing in First Esdras, perfect match. Bhagasra fits Zerubbabel, and again far better than Mordecai, which is laughable, really. This protection is that of Darius's decree to protect Zerubbabel and the lost tribes who were returning to Jerusalem. Proven. Fact. This was not so hard, really. Why can't scholars do this? Well, for one, they're too busy claiming First Esdras is not found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, when here you have it right here. But they need this to force Esther into the narrative, which is not found in Scripture, there, nor even a proto-fragment. This fragment is proto-First Esdras, not Esther. With the high likelihood, it's not even proto, but from the original Greek of Esdras, which we have a Latin interpretation today. And in fact, if you go all the way back to the Hebrew, and then of course it's in English now that we're looking at, so things could be out of order and changed a little, no surprise. However, Proto-First Esdras is just fine and good enough for us. It ain't Esther. Let's look at the next one. Let's read the second fragment, and then we'll break it down. Is it also Esther, or is it too, perhaps, First Esdras from Ezra, or of the same period? 4Q Proto-Esther A. And they listened to Pater Eza, your father. Notice that the dots there, those portions are missing. I stopped there. The fragment is cut off. But it's enough here to render a firm decision, especially for that part. Wait till you see that. And amid the officials of the royal apparel, break, to work in the service of the king in accordance with all that you have received, break. In that hour the king could not go to sleep. Literally, his spirit was stretched. And he commanded that the books of his father be read before him, and among the books there was a scroll, the mouth of which was sealed with 7 seals by the signet ring of his father Darius, the heading of which, and of course it's cut off there, Eos. Yeah, the DAR is not actually there. Darius the king, to the officials of the kingdom, peace. It was opened and read, and in it was found, now here they go again, Darius. It's actually just Eos or Yus. There's no DAR there either time, those last 2 times. It just doesn't happen. The king to the kings who will reign after me, that would be his son, and to the officials of the kingdom, peace. It should be known to you that every tormentor and liar. Okay, let's break it down. Beginning with this name, PROTO-ESTHER. Say who? That's not a Bible name, is it? Well, you won't find it in the Bible. It certainly is not Esther, and that would be ludicrous, and you'll see why. Try to force it because it's easy A. They do, but that's not the word, and there's a whole word there which explains who this is. It's right there in front of our face. Right there for every scholar to see, and I cannot for the life of me understand how I haven't seen one single scholar get what this is. So we'll see. PROTO-ESTHER. It already looks like something. Okay. Again, remember, Esdras is just the Latin or Greek form of Ezra. And here is an excerpt. In the time of Artaxerxes, Darius, his grandson, Ezra rises to the favor of King Artaxerxes while in Persia. At the same time that Esther joined the concubine group. Yeah, that's right. He was a Levite priest of ancient bloodlines from the son of Zadok, the same ones who were exiled from the temple a few centuries later. The king did honor him, for he found grace in his sight in all his requests. Wow! But that doesn't answer the word. What is this? PROTO-ESTHER. The Greek word pater. This is a very well-known Greek word used hundreds of times in the Bible, meaning father. But is Ezra a father? Oh, wait a minute. Where is this story again? Oh, wait, we're in Persia. Does it have a meaning there? Even the Catholics record Persians called their priests pater. This is where they get the English title father for priest, as in Persia, one and the same. And they admit that they get it from Mithraism, not from the Bible. Let's overlook that Yahushua said, call no man pater. Yeah, that's what he said. Or father, because it's written in Greek. But that's after Ezra, and he is a priest of Yahuwah, even while in Persia, and the king knew this, honored him, and gave him grace and everything he asked for. Now, where am I going with this? This is actually very simple. Pater is priest in Persia, and Easy A is the name of that priest who is prominent in our timeline in Persia. Who could it be? Priest Ezra. Esther was not a priest, nor a father. Her father's name is Abihail, so that don't work. Just doesn't jive, folks, as PROTO-ESTHER doesn't fit his name, her name, Mordecai's name, or anything in the text, but it fits priest Ezra perfectly. Man, they aren't even trying here. This is so obvious. The rest of the story will remedy this for good, but really, more than anything, as you find things like this, and sometimes fragments are not always easy to read and interpret, and I understand that. You got to give credit where credit is due from that standpoint. However, this is an oversight of epic proportion by scholars and really identifies exactly what this text must be about. So really, when you're reading the rest of the text, it should fit this context. That's the way we should look at it, and that's the way we're going to look at it. First of 8 criteria for the second fragment, 1 Esdras exact fit. Esther fails again. And this is just a fragment of a sentence and doesn't really say much, but again, these scholars can't even read a partial sentence clearly sometimes, and this is one of those cases. It says, amid the officials of the royal apparel. You see that? Yes, Esther mentions royal apparel, but it does not mention officials of royal apparel or her appearing before officials of royal apparel specifically. Now, it can be assumed, but that's it. There's not a direct tie at all. See, Esther put on her royal apparel, but that's not officials. Mordecai was robed in royal apparel of the king, but that's not officials in their royal apparel. You see that one twice, but what's missing is the officials wearing royal apparel, which is what it says. However, I'm feeling generous. Since Esther and Mordecai were in the service of the king and did enter his court, or at least Esther did, we are going to allow them to assume that, even though the text does not, but will allow it, that Esther fits this portion of the fragment, as we do not know the full context of the sentence in all fairness, though it certainly does not appear to fit at all. But we'll give it to him. Zerubbabel also is promised royal robes in his victory, so actually even that is not an exclusive claim to Esther in the slightest. He was to sit next to Darius on the throne as his cousin even. The problem is most don't really know the story of 1st Esdras, and that includes many scholars. But again, same problem. The fragment does not say that our character specifically is arrayed in royal apparel. That's not what it says. It says the officials arrayed in royal apparel. That can only be assumed in Esther as it's not part of the story. However, that is not the case in 1st Esdras. Let's see. Here we have the contestants appearing before the officials, all the princes of Persia and Media, governors, etc. Now we have a council that would be arrayed in royal apparel. In Esther, we can only assume it. It is not a direct quote, however, in either. It doesn't say that in, verbatim, word for word here in 1st Esdras either, but 1st Esdras sets up for that to be the case. Esther does not really. You have to assume it completely, from nothing. And also read further, and you will find Darius agreed to all of this and more for the winner. Therefore, we are going to call it a check for both in this instance, though 1st Esdras, again, a far better fit, a more exact match, as with pretty much all of this when you really break it down. To work in service of the king in accordance with all that you have received. Again, one would have to assume this in Esther, and it would be forced, but again, feeling generous, we're going to let that stand because it is a reasonable assertion somewhat. 1st Esdras requires the same, though logically it actually is a far better match once again, as he won a contest, and that fits this context much, much better. This sounds like one who did so, much more than Mordecai's story. However, we are going to check both because as this is proto, not direct quotes, the tone is there and both could logically fit this partial sentence. Don't worry, we will add them all up in the end, and one would have to overcome, especially Peter, Ezra, priest, Ezra. Done. In that hour, the king could not go to sleep, for his spirit was stretched. Now, that happened in Esther. but not exclusive to Esther once again. But in Esther, on that night could not the king sleep. Indeed, there's a check. However, that same thing happened in 1st Esdras, and better fits the context. One must wonder whether the writer of Esther didn't actually copy portions of 1st Esdras. Just a thought. So again, checks for both. Esther doesn't win on a single point alone, by the way. Think about that. And he commanded that the books of his father be read before him. Uh-oh. Yes, in Esther he commanded the book of records be brought. But what's that? They were read. But what records? It does not say the Chronicles of the Kings. That's the history from his fathers. It then tells us he found Mordecai's act from recent years during his own reign and administration. Artaxerxes had his own records read, not his father's. That's just not there. He discovered Mordecai was never rewarded and decided to reward him in the story of Esther. Nothing about ancient history there. Only during his administration. Therefore, this is not a match. Is there a story in which the records of the preceding kings, his fathers, would be ordered and brought? Why, yes, there is, and it's not found in Esther. Syria and Phoenicia, the Samaritans, who will conquer the temple in 165 BC. Yes, we do prove that. And the Dead Sea Scrolls say that. That's what they say. You can't change it. Objected a second time to the continuation of the second temple project. So they did this twice. In doing so, they write their objections to King Darius, who then orders that the scrolls of his fathers, specifically Cyrus, as that is when the temple was decreed to be rebuilt. He found that scroll, and there you have it, an exact match. 1st Esdras, check. Scrolls of his fathers. Esther fails this one again, as Artaxerxes only read his own scroll from his own administration, proven right there in the words of Esther. You can't argue with it. Now's where things get a little confused, and what some scholars do is prey on such confusion to stretch things to their own propaganda. You can see how clear it is thus far that this fragment really is coming from 1st Esdras, not Esther. You can see that the first fragment was the same indisputably. Now we have this. We can fix this, though, and you will likely get it. Among the books, there was a scroll from his father, Darius. Now, first, there is no scroll from Artaxerxes' father in the story of Esther. It's just not there. Neither his father Xerxes nor Darius. He doesn't read their records but his own. So that's a fail. He was looking for his own, which is exactly what was read to him, and he found the recent act of Mordecai, which he then rewarded, and that's just not a fit. However, 1st Esdras 8 fits this, but not Darius. His father or forefather, Cyrus, his scroll. Now, why would we say so, that this is a fit? Because 1st Esdras, as well as the book of Ezra, have this exact issue. In fact, this is something to note that actually proves that this is very well likely 1st Esdras, because this is a noted issue with it. Scholars have noted that Ezra 2:7, I believe it is, for instance, is a confusing of the kings. 1st Esdras has the same issue. We even see Artaxerxes mentioned in between Cyrus and Darius, which cannot be Artaxerxes, it's Cambyses. He's the only one in between. Of course, he has a Chaldean name, Ahasuerus, And here we have in Esther Ahasuerus as the name of Artaxerxes. So everything just gets kind of jumbled up when you're looking at these names, in Persia specifically. History does it too, and this is where a lot of scholars just kind of lean, and they're like, oh, this, that, okay, whatever. But what is obvious, it's confusing, but we can keep track. This is Cyrus, the Great's scroll being sought, not Darius once. How do we know? Well, it becomes apparent in context in the reading of the rest of this fragment even, especially the name of his son. Now we're going to get there, so I'm going to explain this in more detail. Hang in there. So for now, because we know where we are heading, so take this one on faith a little, it's okay, we'll come back. We're going to give first Esdras a check here, and Esther is another X. It can't possibly fit this. Here's where scholars fill in blanks without truly applying solid logic, in our opinion. They have shallow logic here, but not solid. They see the father Darius and then assume this must be Darius, and then the next as well is Darius, Darius' son. Of course, that wrecks the entire fragment, and nothing will make sense, including Esther. Nothing would work. But I'll explain. What's written on the fragment, that's what we have here. They add the DAR. It doesn't say Darius here. Again, that is an assumption. It's not there. They're adding the DAR. Again, on the surface, that could make sense if the name could be accurate, but it's not. All we see on the fragment is IUS or YUS both times. It's incomplete. So the question is, does this make sense, or are they filling in the blanks accurately with DAR, Darius, which they are only assuming it's not there? Now, like the last one, we are going to insert Cyrus here, and the final piece will bring this all together, because Cyrus will make sense, Darius will not, when we review the next frame. And rectify both fragments. Cyrus, IUS or YUS, still appropriate here at the end of his name. It fits. King Darius commanded the scrolls of Cyrus be brought, and he found the temple order there. Again, Esther has nothing like this and does not remotely tie. So this fragment must fit another story, which we have already well proven originates in 1st Esdras, as there is way too much that is a perfect match already. So again, we're going to give a check here for 1st Esdras and an X for Esther, which does not fit this in the slightest, as even Darius' scroll has nothing to do with that story where Artaxerxes brought his own scrolls from his own period, right there evidenced in this story. Just doesn't work. So here we go, the reckoning. Here's a list of the progression of kings in this era of Persia. Cyrus the Great is succeeded by Cambyses, his son, who is also known as Ahasuerus. That's his Chaldean name, Babylonian name of sort, a rule applied in 1st Esdras, by the way. In fact, for Cambyses, although he takes it and he calls him Artaxerxes. And some get very confused, yet there's really no confusing, because it's got to be between Cyrus and Darius, because the temple was ordered under Cyrus and finished under Darius. So, gee, what emperor could be in between? Well, it's got to be the only one that was there. So then Darius I is the 3rd emperor. There's this guy named Smerdis, which was this conspiracy. It's a case of mistaken identity where supposedly people thought he was Cambyses. He was a sorcerer and didn't actually last that long. But it doesn't matter, because he ruled as an imposter, still as Cambyses. It was still the reign of Cambyses. That doesn't change, regardless of the name. Again, this era is not easy to keep track, but we can. It can be done. Here's the issue. This decree is a king ending in IUS or YUS, with a son whose name also must end in IUS or YUS. Now Cyrus fits the first, and his son fits the second. That is the progression in this fragment. If it were Darius and Darius, that's not even right, because Darius didn't call his son Darius. He called him Xerxes. Darius could fit the first one, no problem with that. But his son doesn't work. It's not IUS or YUS as an ending. But Cambyses or Ahasuerus fits. And that is what this is. It's Cyrus and his son Cambyses. That's what's on this decree, because he was reading the decree of the temple. It's all there. It is the scroll of Cyrus being read here, and the account is clear it is because he decreed the temple rebuilt. The temple was halted under his son Cambyses, whom Ezra again calls Artaxerxes, by his Chaldean name, essentially. Then the temple was completed under Darius I. Now it can't be halted 2 generations after it had already been built. So no way that his grandson, Artaxerxes, the next one, as you see, could be injected in that part of the narrative. He comes later, in the days of Ezra, but see, Ezra is not in the days of Zerubbabel. That story happens first. You have 3 migrations, mainly. Doesn't mean there weren't more at some points, but there were 3 main decreed migrations between Cyrus, and you have one under Darius, which is the Zerubbabel migration, and then you have one under Artaxerxes, the same guy in Esther's story, who was reigning. And in that same year, you've got the lost tribes returning in the final migration, and Esther didn't go with them. That is questionable. Okay, so the temple was completed under Darius I. And everything makes sense in that instance. This is the reading of the scroll of King Cyrus's decree to rebuild the temple, and this is Darius ordering such at the behest of the complaint from Samaria, trying to halt it again, as we showed you before. Of course, they failed. But what also fails and continues to fail is Esther in comparison to this fragment. This is first Esdras. Check. Okay, so review this again if you need, but first Esdras matches 8 of 8 criteria for the second fragments. 100%. Want to argue with a few? That's okay. We'll make it easy. Let's say it's only 5 out of 8. There you go. It still fits far better than Esther, which is a complete failure, an absolute illiterate proposition as fitting to this fragment, even as a proto-fragment, a related fragment. Hers lands at 3 out of 8, or 38%. Last I checked in school, that was a failing grade. This is not Esther's story. It is first Esdras, written by the prophet Ezra. Then the first fragment was even worse, as first Esdras matches 100% and Esther 0. Wow. Why do we even have to have this conversation? Especially when you have the very name, Pater, Ezra, father, or really, priest, Ezra. Right there in the scroll, here's his name. Wow. And then even in the first one, Bhagasra is clearly a better match to Zerubbabel, and the Most High really just nails that fragment completely. There's no way it could be Esther, Most High. She does not identify Yahuwah in any sense, under any title, in any way. It just doesn't work. And those are the 2 most important elements in both fragments. So right out of the gates, Esther cannot match. There is no way to force this, yet some scholars, many scholars, are trying. And it's time to call them out for it. So let's end on a positive note here as a takeaway. Let's forget the fraud perpetrated and remember that first Esdras is found, perhaps proto, but it is there in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Esther is not. This should be retitled Proto-First Esdras. both scrolls, with a heavy leaning toward it actually being first Esdras, again with the language barrier from Hebrew to Greek to Latin to English. It may not appear word for word or even be in the same order as is common, but that's okay. See, we're fine with just knowing that first Esdras has been found, even in proto form, in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Wow, what a find! This is incredible, and we will be following up on this very soon. We hope you have learned some valuable insights from this testing of Esther in our original Canon series. Please like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to click the bell. Of course, if you truly wish to be notified, go to thegodculture.com or bookofjubilees.org, our other site, and fill in the pop-up, and we'll notify you, since YouTube has failed us and you on that front for almost 2 years now. They just can't bring themselves to let people know about our videos. Nice censorship, but it won't work. Don't worry. Like us on Facebook at The God Culture, _space original. Also, check out our published books now being read in over 60 countries worldwide at ophirinstitute.com. Also, bookofjubilees.org has Jubilees especially broken out by region. We have it available on Shopee Philippines and Amazon. Also, don't forget, we have over 300 videos now on this channel. You may not see them all, so go to the main homepage and look at the playlists, and you'll see everything's in order pretty much. We locate the ancient land of gold in our books, Ophir, as well as our video series, Solomon's Gold series, and the Garden of Eden, in the Philippines, which restores prophecy, and it is a monumental case indeed. Also available in a dynamic pictorial coffee table book. We restore the book of Jubilees to its rightful place as inspired Torah. Ooh, yep, we do. Check it out. We dare anyone to attempt to disprove these positions, as we know that journey will change your life. Always remember to prove all things for yourself. Yah bless to everyone.